You won't find any vampire being repelled by a cross or a crucifix in this vampire flick. Or will you? Robert Eggers' 2024 reimagining of F.W. Murnau's 1922 silent horror classic Nosferatu is definitely a different breed of vampire flick. Let's take a look at how Eggers' recent film deals with demonic possession, religion, and the occult. When we meet Nosferatu's protagonist, Ellen Hutter, right at the beginning of the movie, she is begging for spiritual companionship. With hands folded as if in prayer, she calls out for a spirit of any celestial sphere, anything to respond to her call. Well, when you invite anything, you're going to get anything. What ends up responding to that call is, of course, a demon. Ellen's soul-wrenching plea wakes the vampire Orlok even in a distant land. And this is one of the things I really love about Eggers' Nosferatu. Ellen's being influenced by Orlok is not portrayed as some sort of a romantic, telepathic bond that transcends time and space, but as an actual demonic possession. This tracks with actual vampire lore because traditionally a vampire is not a sexy, attractive being, but simply a demon that animates a corpse. As Orlok says in Eggers' Nosferatu, a vampire is an appetite. Without a mind, without a soul, without reason or any semblance of human feeling. It is an appetite that robs life from the living. The same demon animating Orlok's dead body is also possessing the living Ellen. And that demon responded to Ellen's call. She reached out begging anything to be her companion, and what answered was nothing more than an appetite. And this tracks well with Catholic demonology too, because as any Catholic exorcist will tell you, in order to become demonically possessed, there has to be some kind of an open door. A person has to issue an invitation to a demon to enter that person's life, whether inviting a demon is intended or not. Demons don't care about your intentions. They will simply take advantage of any opportunity that presents itself to them. And maybe this is the origin of the legend that a vampire can only enter a home if invited. In Ellen's case, she is starved for love, even though she has her husband Thomas, who clearly loves her very much. At one point in the movie, Ellen tells her friend Anna Harding, "Thank you for loving me." That's a big clue into Ellen's character, and the reason why, years before marrying Thomas, she had sought the spiritual companionship of anything. And there's even an exorcism scene in this movie, but what you won't see here is the use of the traditional exorcism and vampire fighting weapons, holy water and a cross or a crucifix. The first glimpse that we get of old world Christianity that predominates in so much vampire legend and lore is at the very beginning of the film when Ellen is moving towards her bedroom window and a small, plain, slightly out of focus cross can be seen on the wall behind her. We see something similar later in the film when Dr. Albin, the Van Helsing character who has come to town to solve the puzzle of the plague that is afflicting not only Ellen but begins to spread to the rest of the town as well, including Ellen's husband Thomas and their friends, the Harding family, is seated by Ellen's bed when she is in a possessed state. Hanging on the wall is a plain, slightly out of focus cross. It's a far cry from a lot of other vampire flicks where the cross is thrust at the vampire like a weapon and successfully chases the monster away. You won't see that happening in Robert Eggers' Nosferatu. In fact, at one point we see Ellen with her friend Anna Harding, and Anna is holding a rosary. She tells Ellen, "God is with us." right before being attacked by Orlok, while the rosary lies abandoned on Anna's pillow. All of this combines to suggest that the cross has no power. The fact that it just lies on Anna's pillow means that it has been forgotten. It's totally ineffective. And in several of my other videos on this channel, I discuss noticing that exact thing in several recent films, one of them being Late Night with the Devil. But that is not the same thing that is happening in this movie, as we will soon see. So let's take a look at Dr. Albin's exorcism of Ellen. At one point, Dr. Albin shoves his closed fist close to Ellen's face in order to show her a large ring that adorns one of his fingers, as he tells the demon possessing Ellen to behold this ancient talisman. Now, it's not clear what image is on the ring, at least I can't make it out on the screens that I've watched Nosferatu on so far, but I wonder if this could be a reference to the Ring of Solomon. In ancient Jewish and Christian lore, found particularly in the text, the Testament of Solomon, the great Israelite king Solomon, the son of King David, renowned for his wisdom and riches, possessed a ring that had been given to him by the archangel Saint Michael as a gift from God himself. And this ring had the power to summon, command, and exorcise demons. And yes, this is the same seal of Solomon that forms one of the keys to the final door in the first Silent Hill game. In Nosferatu, is Dr. Albin's ring a copy of the Ring of King Solomon, or at least inspired by it? Albin then proceeds to call for aid upon not Christ or any Christian saints, but upon both angelic and demonic spirits from Jewish and Christian tradition. He asks first for the protection of Chamuel, Haniel, and Zadkiel. The El at the end of these names is the Hebrew word for God, and is always a clue that we are dealing with an angelic being, either one who remained loyal to God, like an archangel, or one who left his place in heaven. There are demons' names ending in El also. Chamuel, whose name means one who seeks God, is an archangel mentioned in several Jewish texts, including the Talmud, where he is said to be one of the angels encountered by Moses on Mount Sinai, as Moses was on his way to receive the Torah, the law, from God. In that encounter, Chamuel tells Moses that he is the angel responsible for bringing peace to marriages. In Christian tradition, Chamuel was said to be one of the 7 archangels who stand before God's throne, as described in the book of Revelation, chapter 4, verse 5. But Chamuel is no longer recognized as one of the archangels in the Catholic tradition. He is not named in the Bible itself, and the Congregation for Divine Worship and the Discipline of the Sacraments, in the 2001 document, Directory on Popular Piety and the Liturgy, issued the following statement: "The practice of assigning names to the holy angels should be discouraged, except in the cases of Gabriel, Raphael, and Michael, whose names are contained in Holy Scripture." Michael and Gabriel appear in both the Old and New Testaments. The Archangel Raphael appears only in the Old Testament Book of Tobit, which is canonical, divinely inspired scripture for Catholics and Eastern Orthodox, although it is not in Protestant Christian Old Testament canon. But even though this document was published recently by the Holy See, it is not a new idea. 3 previous popes had also agreed that the naming of angels whose names didn't already appear in Scripture was a bad idea. Popes Leo XII, Pius VIII, and Gregory XI, all of whom reigned in the 19th century. The rationale for this is that calling on angels by names that we don't have an authoritative, divinely inspired source for is kind of like Ellen at the beginning of this movie calling out for anything to respond to her. If we call out for something that we name Chamuel, how do we know that we're actually getting an angel in response? However, you can still find, especially in older churches, some stained glass windows featuring the archangel Chamuel. Dr. Albin then names the angel Haniel, whose name means grace of God, God is my grace, or my gracious God. In the third book of Enoch, chapter 6, Haniel is said to have been the angel who took Enoch into heaven, as related in the Old Testament book of Genesis, chapter 5. In the Catholic tradition, Haniel was ranked in the angelic choir of the virtues. I discussed the angelic choirs and their hierarchy in my video on Hereditary, where I mentioned that film's demon Paimon being originally a member of the angelic choir of Dominations. And the final archangel Dr. Albin names is Zadkiel, whose name means God is my righteousness, or my righteous God. Traditionally named as one of the 7 archangels standing before God's throne, as Chamuel was, Zadkiel continues to be honored in the Eastern Orthodox and Coptic Christian traditions, and is associated with the quality of mercy. So, appropriately, Zadkiel is said traditionally to be the angel who stopped the patriarch Abraham from sacrificing his son Isaac in Genesis chapter 22. Having called upon these angelic beings, Albin then turns to beings classified as demonic. The first demon, Eligos, is listed as a great duke of hell in the grimoire The Lesser Key of Solomon, also known as the Ars Goetia. He is said to be a bringer of conflict and causes persons of high status to be loved and obeyed. The demon Orobus can also be found in the Lesser Key as a great prince of hell. Orobus is said in the Lesser Key to bestow knowledge and control and bring an end to slander and gossip directed against his devotees. And finally, we have the much more widely known Asmodee or Asmodeus, described in the Lesser Key as a king of hell. It's actually Asmodeus whom King Solomon put in charge of the building of the Jerusalem temple, according to the Testament of Solomon, with, of course, the help of Solomon's magical ring. So Albin has called upon 3 angels and 3 demons for their assistance in the exorcism of the Orlok demon possessing Ellen. 3 is, of course, a highly significant number in several spiritual traditions, and I discuss this in a couple of my videos, especially on Longlegs and in my series on Faith, the Unholy Trinity. But all through Ellen's exorcism, Albin never uses holy water, and we never see a cross, except for the one that we see out of focus on the wall behind Albin. This cross, of course, remains on the wall of the room all throughout this exorcism. Now, in a movie that uses more traditional tropes, that cross would be getting grabbed off of the wall and stuck in the demon's face. But in Eggers Nosferatu, this never happens. But wait! Just wait. Albin's exorcism calms things down, but it's really just a stopgap measure. It's obvious that a much more permanent solution is going to have to be found in order to take Orlok out. After this exorcism, we learn that at this point in the film, we are drawing nearer to Christmas. And this is not just narrative color. Of course, Christmas in the Christian tradition is the feast acknowledging the birth of Christ. In fact, the word Christmas is an abbreviation of the words Christ's Mass. Now, whether or not you believe that Jesus was actually born historically on or around December 25th is immaterial. The important point here is that his birth is celebrated and acknowledged on that date. And of course, in ancient non-Christian traditions, the period around the winter solstice, when the hours of daylight begin to incrementally increase, were dedicated to celebrating the return of light, life, and warmth to the world. And it's light that is going to be instrumental in destroying Orlok in the end. The fact that Christmas is approaching signals that the returning light is going to bring salvation. At one point, Dr. Albin refers to his own personal background as one in which he wrestled with the devil as Jacob wrestled with the angel at Peniel. This is a reference to Genesis chapter 32, verses 22 to 32, in which the patriarch Jacob, the grandson of Abraham and the son of Isaac, wrestles all night with the angel of the Lord and emerges from this contest with a new name, Israel, meaning one who wrestles with God. So Albin is characterizing himself as a kind of inverse of Jacob. Whereas Jacob wrestled with a divine being, Albin has wrestled with the diabolical, perhaps suggesting that Albin's struggle is an even more noble and perhaps a much more dangerous one. When Albin and Ellen's husband Thomas investigate the office of Herr Nock, the one who sent Thomas to Orlok in the first place, they discover all kinds of nefarious things, including a large sigil drawn on the office's floor. When Albin sees this sigil, he says, "Solomonari," referring to Romanian lore that defined Solomonari as sorcerers instructed in magic by the devil himself and were able to ride dragons and have the power to cause weather events. Each Solomonar, or sorcerer, has a grimoire, what Albin refers to as a codex of secrets. So this whole time, Herr Nock, Thomas's boss, who sent him to Orlok, was one of the Solomonari, a sorcerer of Eastern European association, who was working for the demon possessing Orlok and had been tasked with getting Orlok access to Ellen, which he did through sending Ellen's husband on this business trip to secure property for Orlok close to where Ellen lived. In one scene, while Thomas and Ellen travel along their city streets, we hear in the background a street preacher shouting the words, "I stood on the sand of the sea." He is quoting from the book of Revelation, specifically chapter 13, which describes the emergence of the beast from the sea. This is the same infamous beast whose number is said to be 666, or 616 depending on which manuscript tradition you're working with. I discuss the significance of this number in some more detail in my videos on Longlegs and my series on Faith, the Unholy Trinity. While the street preacher goes on and on reciting this passage from the book of Revelation, Ellen is clearly not doing too well. She becomes increasingly agitated and distressed as she continues to be within earshot of this holy scripture that describes Satan and the human authorities to whom he gives his power. Is this because it's just a generic Bible passage? It's just the Bible, period? Could it be any Bible passage that got this reaction out of her? Or is it because this passage in particular deals specifically with Satan and the human beings to whom he gives power? Could it even be that Ellen is being possessed by this exact demon being described in the book of Revelation? This beast who is empowered by Satan himself. Is the demon possessing Ellen, and therefore the demon also possessing Orlok himself, the chief servant of Satan? Is that why Ellen has such a strong reaction to the Bible passage that describes the beast from the sea? Who is that chief servant? When Ellen and Thomas arrive home, Ellen, having experienced this distress and having been broken down by hearing this passage from Revelation, screams to Thomas, "We're already dead," and then she tears her clothing. This is an ancient expression of mourning in Judaism called Kuri'ah, which is attested in the Bible and is still practiced among pious Jews at funerals to this day. So when Ellen screams, "We're already dead," and then tears her clothes, she is mourning not only for her friends' impending deaths, but also in anticipation of her own death. When Albin, Thomas, and local physician Wilhelm Sievers go to the mausoleum of the Harding family who have been killed by Orlok and discover that Friedrich Harding, the husband and father of the family, has now added his own death to those of his pregnant wife and 2 children, Albin calls upon Jehovah. This is a form of God's name that developed in the Middle Ages as the result of combining the Hebrew characters for God's name with the Hebrew vowels of the word Adonai, meaning Lord. This Hebrew construct was intended to be a safeguard against the commandment to never take God's name in vain. Now, the word vain simply means empty, so taking God's name in vain means using it in an empty manner. It can also mean using God's name in an outright abusive manner. So if you never say God's name, you're absolutely sure to never misuse it. And so in some point in the ancient Israelite faith, and later in Temple Judaism, the practice emerged of just never pronouncing God's name at all. But God's name still appears in the written text of the Hebrew scriptures. So how to respect God's name when you have to say it out loud, or even just reading it silently in your own mind? The solution was to leave the base Hebrew letters intact. Hebrew was originally written with only consonants. Vowels were, of course, pronounced, but not written down until they were created by Jewish scholars known as the Masoretes in the early Middle Ages. So the consonants of the divine name, Yod, He, Vav, He, remained. But as a clue that the sacred name itself was not to be pronounced, the vowels of the Hebrew word for Lord, Adonai, were added to those consonants representing the divine name. This actually created an unpronounceable word, but the reader wasn't supposed to pronounce it. It was just meant to be a clue that you were supposed to say or even think the word Adonai instead of the divine name. When the reader saw this strange combination of consonants and vowels, that reader would know to just say the Hebrew word Adonai. But later in the Middle Ages, Christian monks translating the scriptures came across this Hebrew combo word and rendered it into the Latin literally. This resulted in the word Jehovah. So Jehovah is actually a Latin rendering of an invented Hebrew term meant to substitute for God's name. After calling upon God under the name Jehovah, Albin paraphrases an invocation from the Lesser Key of Solomon, calling upon the power of 3 names: Tetragrammaton, Onyx Hexaton, and Primamatum. Tetragrammaton is a reference to those 4 Hebrew consonants representing the divine name of God. The word tetragrammaton is taken from the Greek meaning 4 letters or 4 characters. In an article on Medium.com, Dan Harms provides the passage from the Lesser Key that contains all 3 of these names and shows that both of the other names, Onyx Hexaton and Primamatum, might be adjustments of the original Onyx Phenaton and Primumaton, both of which are also used as names of God in this passage from the Lesser Key. The article goes into quite a bit more detail than I'm able to go into here, so I'll put the link to that article in the description for this video, and I encourage you to check it out. So Albin is using 3 names for God in order to command the demon animating Orlok into the lake of fire. This, too, is from the book of Revelation, where the dragon and the beast, yes, the same beast from earlier, who emerged from the sea and whose number is 666, and may well be the beast possessing Orlok and Ellen, are cast into the lake of fire in eternal punishment. So again, it is suggested that Orlok is that major demonic being from the book of Revelation, the beast from the sea. As the Hardings' remains are set alight to cleanse them from the vampiric demon's contagion, Albin concludes by saying that this same God will come to judge the quick and the dead and the world by fire. The word quick here is being used in its more archaic sense of living, so it means that God will judge the living and the dead. This phrase appears in that passage in the Goetia that gives those three names of God, but a far earlier occurrence of the phrase is found in the Catholic exorcism ritual as written in the Rituale Romanum. Albin leads Thomas to Orlok's lair, but Orlok is not there at the time, and Albin knew that Orlok wouldn't be there because Albin knows that Orlok is with Ellen. Albin and Ellen had planned this together without letting Ellen's husband Thomas know, because of course if he knew, Thomas would try to save her, and the idea is not to save Ellen anymore. Ellen had agreed to invite Orlok to spend the evening with her so that she could entrap him. She keeps him with her until sunrise, and that is what will end up destroying him. He cannot exist past dawn without being in the soil of his grave. And this, folks, is where the use of the cross comes in. Because while we never see a cross being used as an anti-vampire weapon in this movie, Orlok is indeed shown the cross at the end, not as a physical object, but as something much more important. What lies behind the cross? What the cross actually means. Ellen sacrifices her life so that others will live. And it does not get any more Christ-like than that. Just as Christ offered up his life so that others would be saved, Ellen Hutter offers up her life to save her husband and others, and to achieve justice for her slain dear friends, the Harding family. Being so near Christmas, when the physical light of the sun and the spiritual light of the world take predominance, Ellen embodies that light, and the love with which she surrendered her life is what defeats the evil of the vampiric demon that has been tormenting her. And maybe that's why the cross has been in the background this whole time. It's there, but it's waiting within Ellen to be unleashed at the right moment, not as a prop, but as the power of love. The woman who was so starved for love that she risked companionship with evil rather than risk loneliness, finally finds love not in how others love her, but in how she loves others. Love isn't a feeling, it's the cross. And so even though it's not done in the traditional way, the cross is indeed what defeats the vampire in the end. So what are your thoughts on Robert Eggers' Nosferatu? Did you see something in the movie that differs from my assessment here in this video? Do you agree with me? Did you see something in the film that hasn't been mentioned here that you'd like to see discussed? Let me know in the comments. As always, thank you so much for giving my videos some time of your day. I hope that you enjoyed watching it as much as I enjoyed making it, and I hope to see you for the next one. Take good care until then. Bye.